Welcome back to Police Academy Prep, High Liability Vehicle Ops. This is Deputy Z. I'm bringing this video to you guys to have a more shortened experience of this chapter. If this is the first video you're checking out for High Liability Chapter 1 Vehicle Ops, I would recommend you watch the in-depth review that is an hour and a half long. I know that is a little daunting, but I will say that it is so in-depth with question examples that watching that video entirely and maybe even a couple times will give you an advantage when going into the exam. Now, I'm creating this shortened version, hopefully in 20 to 30 minutes, for those who are maybe it's exam day and you have a 20-30 minute drive to work. You can't listen to an hour and a half and get that full review that you're looking for. So this is going to be a shortened review. I'm only going to go over the bold and bullet point type terms in this chapter. That way I can get you that quick review real fast so you can jump right into that exam, or maybe you have a 20-minute drive to your friend's house. You want to get a quick over review without having to watch the full in-depth version. Again, if you have not watched the full in-depth version, I really encourage you. I think you'll be impressed with the content and how much in-depth I go into that detail. So no further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this speed version of Chapter 1 in the High Liability book, Vehicle Operations. So the first thing we're going to jump into are some tips you should follow to prevent accidents. Learn to recognize driving situations that can be hazardous. Assume other drivers will make errors. Adjust your speed, position, direction. Scan frequently and scan far enough ahead. Then we go into our detecting potential hazards through the use of our senses. So our senses being vision, hearing, smell, and touch. Those are the four senses to detect potential hazards. So under vision, we have some bullet points here. Acuity, that is sharpness of vision. Then we have depth perception, the ability to judge distance and perceive space to determine how far away an object is. Peripheral vision, that is above, below, behind you, around you, from every side. Color vision, obviously the ability to distinguish colors. And night vision, being able to see clearly in the darkness. So make sure you know those. Those are definitely terms to remember. Then we have our hearing. The sense of hearing helps you to locate the source of sound that may indicate a problem with a vehicle, a suspicious incident, or a crime. It could be, when it comes to sound, there are factors to consider, whether you have your sirens on or anything like that. If drivers' windows are open or closed, that will obviously affect how hearing goes. Then we move into smell. You can use your sense of smell to detect many problems, maybe an unusual odor, or any other smells coming from other vehicles. You're looking for smoke or other indicators of smoke. Obviously, if you're getting a weird type gas smell, you should consider calling for help. Just be aware that a fire can start if you leave your vehicle running in a grassy area for an extended period of time. Then we have touch. Touch can help you detect problems that affect vehicle operation and control. For example, if you feel the steering wheel vibrating excessively, the vehicle may have a steering problem. Or maybe the steering wheel is pulling in one direction. You can have an alignment problem. Then we have observation skills. Several techniques can enhance your ability to be a keen observer, aware of your surroundings, driving below the posted speed limit, and responding appropriately to the environment. Make sure to eat smaller meals more frequently throughout the day, and make sure to get enough rest and sleep before a shift to avoid drowsy driving. Alright, then we move into road and weather conditions. Observation skills and techniques can help officers spot and react to potential road hazards. So, for example, you got potholes, sinkholes, curbs, railroad tracks, any type of hazards like those, you have to be aware of them. Then you have variable road sources such as clay, asphalt, concrete, dirt, gravel, sand, brick roadways, and your vehicle responds differently to each of those types of surfaces. Then you need to be aware of weather. Remember, we are in Florida. You have rain, fog, wind, and extreme bright sunshine. So do be aware there are two here in the state of Florida that are the weather conditions that are most likely to affect your vehicle's performance. That is rain and wind. So again, in Florida, conditions that will most likely affect you are rain and wind. Then we have proactive driving. Frequent occurring crashes include side swipes, right angle collisions, head-on, rear end, and improper backing type crashes. Then we move into seatbelt usage. Do remember that the driver always has to wear a seatbelt. Remember that the passenger always has to wear a seatbelt. And remember, anyone under the age of 18 has to wear a seatbelt anywhere in the car. So the only exception would be the back row. If you're over 18, you don't have to wear a seatbelt. So keep that in mind. There are a few exceptions to this law. Avoiding head-on collisions. So just remember that you always want to avoid a head-on collision. If possible, try to sideswipe and hit the side of a car if you have no other option. Now, if you are forced off the road, make sure you choose what to hit. And listing in order from least dangerous to most dangerous. Your least dangerous is soft objects, bushes, small trees, fences. Then you have objects moving in the same direction. So that's kind of the middle option there. That's if you can't hit a soft object and you don't want to hit a fixed object, you hit an object moving in the same direction. So say a vehicle is moving with you off the side of the road, you can run into that vehicle to help slow you down. Then the worst, most dangerous is a fixed object because you're stopping on a dime, and that type of impact would not be good. Again, you should hit an object with the side of the vehicle rather than head on if you're going to hit it. Then we come into the 3-second rule and the 6-second rule. Remember that these rules are gauged by seeing the vehicle in front of you pass an object like a tree. You count the amount of seconds until you pass that same object. You follow the 3-second rule when, and these are the minimum safe following distances for all vehicles. You follow the 3-second rule when the conditions are clear, the roads aren't wet, there's not a lot of traffic. Then you follow the 6-second rule if it's bad weather or bad road conditions or traffic. So that's the 3-second rule and the 6-second rule. Then we have vehicular motion. You have pitch, roll, and yaw. As I said, is my in-depth one. Pitch, remember the pitcher throws the ball, it's forward, and the catcher throws it back, that's backwards. So pitch is forward and backwards, so it's braking and accelerating. When you accelerate, your head hits the back of your seat. When you brake, your head comes forward into the steering wheel. That is pitch. Then you have roll. Just remember, stop, drop, and roll. When you do that, you don't somersault forward or backwards, you roll right and left. So roll happens when you're turning, and that is your weight shifting side to side in your seat. Then we have yaw. Yaw is end-for-end motion, resulting in the vehicle turning 180 on a horizontal plane. So imagine like hydroplaning and spinning out. The back of your vehicle is moving and you're kind of spinning in circles. That is yaw. Okay, then we talk about vehicle stability. Remember that a low center of gravity is good. The vehicle is more stable. And then a higher, so think of a Humvee or a Charger. Those are low center of gravity. Then you have high center of gravity like trucks and XUVs. Those are less stable because they're more likely to roll over, right? Then we get into tracking width. Tracking width has to do with stability. And basically it means how wide the car is. So think about a Humvee. That car is really wide. It's less likely to roll over versus, say, a smart car that is super thin. You turn right and chance of right falling over. Then we move into electronic stability control. This helps drivers maintain control of their vehicle during extreme steering maneuvers. Then we have a traction control system, TCS, which is part of the electronic stability control. And it is a secondary function and is designed to prevent loss of traction. So if you see traction control, just know loss of traction. If you see electronic stability control, know that it has to do with steering maneuvers and the steering wheel. Then weight transfer and distribution. Know that you need to put your equipment in your car so that your weight is distributed throughout the car and everything is even. Just know, if you're making a right turn, that obviously the weight is going to distribute to the left. And if you're making a left, it's going to distribute to the right. And know that what tire is the weight distribution is going to be on. So, for example, if you are making a right turn, most of the weight is going to be on the driver's side tire because all the weight is transferring to that side in the front. And then the one that's going to have the least amount would be the back passenger tire because there's no weight on that. You could imagine doing a pop a wheelie where because you're turning right, you're basically, that wheel is almost lifting off the ground, so there's no weight on that one. Okay, so then we move on to turns. Bold here, we got a radius. That is the distance from the center of a circle to the outside. So think of a circle with a dot in the middle. It's from that dot to the outer edge of the circle. That's radius. We have increasing radius, decreasing radius, and constant radius. And the terms speak for themselves. If it's an increasing radius, that means the turn gets wider and wider as you're going into the turn. Think of like an on-ramp to a highway, how it's that big turn, and it's not really a perfect circle. It's almost like think of just a wider, it's just an increasing radius. When you have a decreasing radius, the turn gets smaller as you're going into the turn. So think of like a U-turn. As you're making that turn, it's just getting smaller and smaller. Then you have your constant radius. That is, the turn is kind of just your normal 90-degree angle, maybe a right turn at an intersection, or maybe you're driving in a perfect circle. That would be a constant radius. All right. Then we have apex. Apex is the center point of any curve. Then you have apexing techniques. There are 3 techniques. Only one of them is correct. That is the late apex turn. Don't even need to remember the center or the early. Just remember that the early one is early. The center one is in the center of the apex, and the late apex is the correct one, and it's at the end of the turn. So just remember, late apex turn is the correct turn for your apexing technique. Then we have understeer and oversteer. I know these are really complicated for a lot of people. Just remember understeer. Under means less. You are not steering enough. What happens, put yourself in your car, what happens if you are steering less? You're not steering enough. So if you're trying to make a right turn, you don't steer enough, you're going to go straight with like a slight right angle. And if you continue at that trajectory, you're going to hit either a car or you're going to hit the CVS on the corner of the street. That is understeering. And then the correction for that is take your foot off the gas and then continue to steer, but don't apply the brakes. And if you just need to steer off to a safe place if you can't complete the turn. Then we have oversteer. Over means above, means too much. What happens if you're in your car, you're making that right turn, you steer too much? What happens is you're going to turn in like a U-turn type, or you're going to yaw where the back of your car is going to swing out, and then you might, swing out and swing too much and then into the curve. So oversteering is just too much. And then the correction for it is you're taking your foot off the gas the same way as the other one, and then you're steering the car where you want it to go. And same like the other one, don't apply the brakes. So they're pretty much the same. Just oversteer, you steer the car where desired, and then with understeer, you maintain the steering input, but you don't apply the brakes. Wheel tracking. This causes the rear wheels to follow a tighter path than the path the front wheels traveled in a turn. So my example would be you're backed into a parking space, you're trying to go right and get out, and you have 2 cars on each side of you. You have to go further out because your front wheels might clear and not hit the car, but the back of your car or the wheels might hit the car next to you. Or, for example, if you ever made a right turn at an intersection and you cleared the curb with your front tires, but the back tires hit the curb, that is wheel tracking. So your back tires basically turn tighter than your front tires. Steering wheel grip. Make sure your grip is firm yet relaxed, kind of like holding a firearm. You don't want to get white knuckles, and you don't want to be too loose. Hand position. It's 4 and 8 o'clock. Just remember the reason for that is it reduces fatigue because your hands aren't as high. Reduces injury if the airbag deploys because your hands and your bones aren't hitting your face. And it is also a quicker response. So remember 4 and 8 o'clock. Then we have shuffle steering. Refer back to your instructor and how they taught you how to shuffle steer. That is more of a visual learning thing than that is. Be aware of the steps that may be on the chapter exam. My personal recommendation when it comes to steps is to not waste all this time, unless you have extra time on your hands. But do not waste all this time remembering the steps in order. That's just way too much information. If this does come up in the chapter exam, focus more on using common sense where, okay, if they're telling me to do this, then obviously the next step would be to do this. And just use the hand motions in class. Act like you got a steering wheel in front of you and how you would make the right or left turn. And just remember, right and left are just opposites of each other in regards to the steps. Move on to the caster effect. The caster effect is a tendency for a vehicle traveling forward, not backwards, forward, to straighten from a turn when the driver releases the steering wheel. So like I always say, it's that badass feeling. You make that right turn and you kind of release your grip off the steering wheel and it just spins really fast and straightens the vehicle on its own. That is the caster effect. Everyone knows what that is. They just might not have known the term. Again, that is the caster effect. Then we move on to optical driving and hand-eye coordination. So optical driving is also referred to as eye targeting, and eye targeting is also referred to as optical driving. This is just looking where you want to drive. Just like with a firearm, you're always pointing your gun where you're looking, right? So if you are looking to the right, you're going to tend to steer to the right. For example, if you're texting and driving and your phone's on your right side, you're going to generally start steering towards the right side because that's the way your head is facing, that's the way your eyes are facing. So, for example, this comes up later too, might be on the test. If a car is coming at you from the right and you want to go left to get away from that car, don't stare at that car because you're just going to hit it. You're going to stare off to the left because that's where you want to go. So again, eye targeting or optical driving, they're interchangeable. Proper backing, like I said, there are steps here. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You take your foot off the accelerator to the brake. You put your hand on the passenger seat. You lift up a little bit. You look behind you, and you go on the accelerator a little bit. ABS, anti-lock braking system. This is an enhancement to your traditional braking system. What it does is it basically prevents your wheels from locking up. If you've ever seen someone press the brakes too hard, the brakes lock, the wheels lock, and then this car just continues skidding forward. In order to avoid that, they came up with anti-lock braking system. And what this system does is it automatically, without you doing it, you'll be just pressing, it will automatically start, stop off the brakes. That way, when your wheels lock up, it will release the brake on its own, allowing the wheels to turn, which gives them traction. And then it will brake again. And then it will let go of the brake. Then brake again. Then let go of the brake. And then brake again. This is usually when you are emergency stopping or stopping very suddenly. Remember that when you are braking, you want to apply steady, consistent pressure. And the same thing for accelerating. It's just steady, consistent pressure. Smooth, consistent pressure. Okay. And then we talk about cornering. This requires entering an intersection safely and properly at normal driving speeds and making a 90-degree turn to the right or the left. So cornering is just your right or left turn. You're going to do your late apex. You're going to check your wheel tracking so you don't hit the curb. And then, implying the appropriate amount of steering input and speed. Do know that when it comes to entering a turn, you want to brake before entering the turn. And then once you turn, you let off the brake and you don't accelerate until you are just about to exit the turn, aka almost straightening. So again, brake before the turn, let off the brake, turn. As you are straightening out and exiting the turn, that is when you accelerate. And then we talk about backing. Many crashes occur when drivers are backing up. Just remember that in law enforcement, backing up is the most common car accident we will get into. Okay. More steps here. Okay, so now we're talking about several factors that may influence driving performance at night. There is overdriving of vehicle headlights. This is just basically your headlights only reach so far. If you're driving too fast, by the time you recognize there's an obstacle in the road, it's already too late. You're hitting it. So just remember that high beams reach out to 450 feet away. Low beams reach 150 feet away. Those are hard numbers to remember. You're just going to have to ingrain them in your brain. 150 feet on low beams, 450 feet away on high beams. Then we talk about reaction distance. Reaction time remains the same whether driving during the day or the night. So don't get tricked up if they put a trick question in there. Is your reaction time decreased when driving at night? That sounds right, but it's not. I mean, your reaction time is your reaction time. That cannot be changed. But the lack of light increases the time required to observe it. So by the time you observe it, you're able to react. Your reaction time is the same. That's what it's saying here. It's just it might take longer for you to see that deer in the road, and therefore it's too late to brake. So that's reaction distance. Then we have field of vision. So at night, obviously, your field of vision decreases, your peripheral vision decreases, less light, you see less. Simple as that. And then we have a loss of visual cues. So at night, it's just generally darker. It's hard to have depth perception. It's hard to see things Oncoming, it's hard to see things entering the road. Those visual cues. Maybe it's you don't see a sign that says turn upcoming. Those are visual cues. Then we have glare. Keep an eye on glare. Your eyes might need time to adjust. So if the question comes up with how do you avoid glare from an oncoming vehicle, you would look down to the right of the road. You'll see the white line on the side of the road that shows you the edge of the road, and you will just stay as close as you can to that line, knowing you are maintaining your lane by staying as close to that line as possible. Then emergency lights, just be aware that emergency lights create a lot of glare. Okay. Remember that driving in emergency mode, you can never take that lightly. You are placing the public at risk. Make sure you follow specific Florida laws in regards to operating emergency vehicles. Make sure you follow your agency policies and procedures. Do know that it is your responsibility to terminate a pursuit if environmental factors or weather conditions or vehicle conditions, traffic, school zones, all these factors have to be continually in play, and you have to continue to make the decision to stay or terminate pursuit mode. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you know what psychological effects are. They are the measurable changes to normal body functions, such as tunnel vision, selective hearing, increased heart rate, time distortion, and loss of spatial awareness or your fine motor skills. All right. Make sure you obviously are safe in intersections. Intersections are the most dangerous things you might encounter while driving code. So if you see a question in regards to most dangerous, that is most likely going to be an intersection question. That's going to be the answer. But if the question is the most common type of crash, don't put intersections. That's going to be, remember, that's going to be backing. Okay. Now we're going to talk about pursuit. Pursuit is an active attempt by driving an authorized emergency vehicle with your equipment activated to apprehend occupants of a moving vehicle, and obviously the driver and the occupants of that vehicle. Just remember, like I said, you have to consider your decision to engage. Make sure you continue in communication with dispatch, update your location, and make sure if you do terminate or continue that pursuit, you do let them know. Then we have a bunch of court cases here. I'm not going to go too far in depth on those. I would suggest or hope that you have flashcards of some sort with those because they are complex and there are certain tricks to remember in them, so make sure you have that on deck. So with Pinellas Park versus Brown, law enforcement has a duty to protect the public when choosing to continue a pursuit. So you have to protect the public. If you see a school zone coming up, you need to terminate it. It's not worth what could happen, aka killing kids, just to catch somebody in a stolen vehicle, right? Or any other type of reason like that. Then you have Brower v. County of Inyo. This has to do with roadblocks, basically meaning that if you cause the death of a fleeing suspect because your roadblock was not properly marked, they weren't able to see it, and you kill them, you will be held responsible. Then we talk about County of Sacramento v. Lewis. That has adopted the standard referred to in earlier cases involving force. Officers may be liable if their actions are sufficient to shock the conscience of the court. So remember Lewis shocking the conscience, basically meaning that even though you were okay to pursue, what you did was, and you were followed your policy and agency's procedures, but what you're doing was so egregious, maybe jumping medians, driving through a park, driving through a school zone, it shocked the court so much that they're just going to hold you liable just because on the reasonableness aspect, you shouldn't have done that, right? So that's what that one is there. Then we have Scott v. Harris, basically saying that you can't pursue a vehicle for a traffic offense or some minor offense. It's got to be like, your policies and procedures will dictate that from your agency, but we're talking about forcible felonies like carjacking, occupied burglaries, robberies, things like that. All right. Let's see what we got here. Roadblock. The use of vehicles, barricades, cones, or other objects to block traffic flow partially or completely. Tire deflation devices. They got hollow spikes. They got a track or mat base, and it's a form of deployment. Then you have your pursuit immobilization technique. It is using your vehicle to sideswipe the back end of their vehicle in order to end the pursuit. And that concludes the speed version of Chapter 1, Law Enforcement Vehicle Operations of the High Liability book. Like I said in the beginning, this one was specifically created so that you can get a full recap of broad topic and terms, which may not be all the topics on the test. You know how they like to pull questions that you never thought they would pull. So again, this one is just for strictly, maybe it's test day, you're driving a class, it's only a 20-minute drive, you don't have time to listen to the hour and a half, but you want that full recap. That's what this one was for. But if you have not watched the full recap yet, please do so. It is extremely beneficial. I have way more examples. I go more in depth with those examples, and I even give possible test questions that I've seen or I've seen others have. So please give that a review, and good luck on the test. I hope you do great.